When I got a job at Greenburg Market, I thought it was just a job. The shift from 9 in the evening to 6 in the morning is ideal for a student who needs money for his studies. The store was old, but not dilapidated, white walls, the smell of chlorine from cleaning, creaking floors. The cashiers were cheering up for coffee, the movers were grumbling about overwork, and the manager, Jerry, was constantly checking the cameras, as if he was waiting for something. I didn't know that these nights would be hell for me. The first 2 weeks passed quietly. I laid out the goods, wiped the stained glass of the refrigerators, collected empty soda bottles. But one day, at 1 o'clock in the morning, I noticed a piece of paper lying on the counter near the meat department. The handwritten text was clumsy, as if written by a child, "They know where you sleep." I laughed, thinking it was a joke from one of my colleagues. But then things began to happen that could no longer be explained by jokes. The carts that I carefully lined up at the entrance were found scattered throughout the store in the morning. Someone knocked over a rack of canned food, and the cans rolled on the floor as if they had been deliberately scattered. Once I heard someone sobbing in the household chemicals department. As I got closer, I saw a young employee, Amy, trying to pick up a broken vinegar bottle with shaking hands. It seemed to me that someone was following me," she whispered, not looking at me. Then she quit without giving any reasons. Jerry started acting weird. He stopped checking the cameras, instead stood in the back room for hours, closing the door. Sometimes I heard him talking on the phone, lowering his voice. "No, I can't do that. They're watching." One night, I happened to see him carrying a package out of the back room with the edge of a cardboard box sticking out. When I asked what was in there, he replied sharply, "None of your business, man." I started to notice other oddities. Sometimes there were bottles in the milk fridges filled not with milk, but with something dark that looked like blood. I threw them away, thinking that one of the clients was joking. But one morning, when I was checking the goods, I found a note in a bag of vegetables, "They're inside." This time, the text was printed on a printer. I showed it to Jerry, but he just shrugged his shoulders. "Maybe the kids are playing games." Then something happened that changed everything. I worked alone, the others went on a break. Suddenly, the light went on in the household chemicals department. I went to check, thinking the motion sensor had gone off. But there was a body on the floor. A man, about 30 years old, in the work clothes of an employee, with a broken head. An iron pipe covered in blood was lying nearby. I rushed to him, but there was no pulse. The cameras in this department were not working. When the police arrived, they questioned everyone, but they still found no evidence. Jerry said the man was a new employee who had been hired a week ago. But no one knew his name. He wasn't on the staff list. The police left, leaving us with questions. The next night, I went back to work. The light was on in the back room. I looked inside and saw Jerry carving something out of meat that should have been on the counter. "It's not what you think," he said, noticing me. But there was something animal in his eyes, as if he had long ceased to be human. I wanted to leave, but Jerry locked the door. "You already know too much," he whispered. I tried to escape, but he grabbed my arm. We were fighting, and I hit him with a vinegar bottle that was on the table. He fell, hitting his head on the edge of the shelf. The blood spread across the floor like water. It was still dark when I ran outside. I rushed to the police, but when I returned with the officers, Jerry had disappeared. There was no trace of blood in the back room. Just an empty vinegar bottle and scattered documents. One of them had a list of employee names on it. My name was crossed out. Since then, I have been unable to work in stores. Every time I see a supermarket, it seems to me that Jerry is standing behind the counter, smiling his strange smile. Sometimes I receive emails without a return address. There's only one phrase in them: "They know where you sleep." I started checking my apartment, my car, even my place of work, if only I could still call it a job. Everywhere I found traces of something that I couldn't explain. There was a photo of the store taken at night in the glove compartment of the car. Silhouettes of people behind the glass were visible on it. I didn't remember anyone coming there at that time. In the background is a shadow that looks like a man in a work jacket, like Jerry's. But I didn't take this picture. Every day was getting worse. I couldn't sleep. Every sound behind the wall seemed like footsteps. One morning, when I opened the door, I saw a box on the doorstep. Inside was an old apron from the store, covered in stains. I couldn't figure out whose it was. The name Mike was embroidered on the inner seam. It was one of the movers who went on vacation 3 months ago. His phone number was not answered. I decided to go back to the store. Not out of curiosity, but I needed to know. I waited until the store closed and hid in the back room. The night fell heavily, as if it weighed on my shoulders. I could hear someone working behind the wall. The noise of refrigerators, creaking floors, thuds. Then, a conversation. Male voices. One of them was familiar. He knows too much. We need to remove his name from the list. I peered out cautiously. There were 3 men standing in the trading floor. One of them is Jerry. He was alive, but he looked different. His face looked puffy, as if he hadn't eaten in weeks. One of the men was holding documents in his hands. The list has been updated, he said. Now there are only 5. I couldn't understand what they were talking about. But then I heard Amy's name. The girl from the household chemicals department. She's gone, but her name is still in the system. We need to erase all traces. Jerry nodded and went to the computer. I returned home and started digging. I found old records about the store. It turned out that several employees had disappeared in recent years. There were no official statements, it was just that people stopped working and were fired of their own accord. All of them are men and women, between the ages of 25 and 40. I found the address of one of them. A woman named Linda. Her house was empty. There was only a painting on the wall in the children's room. The child drew it, judging by the style. It showed people in a store. Everyone is wearing white coats. One of them was holding a knife. I returned to the store, but it was already afternoon. He pretended to have forgotten his things. I found a folder with documents in the back room. Employee lists marked with crosses. My name was the last one. Below it is the inscription, next. I didn't go home that night. I was sitting in the car outside the store. I was watching. At midnight, Jerry came out with a package. I followed him. He walked towards the old warehouse behind the store. I followed. Inside there are cold chambers covered with frost. The smell of meat and something burnt. I heard a scream. Muffled, muffled. He opened one of the doors. There's a man inside. His hands were chained to the pipe. The face is beaten up. It was Mike, the loader. They take away those who know too much, he whispered. Then they came for me. I do not know how they found out that I was there. They grabbed me and dragged me into another cell. There were 2 more people there. Amy and Linda. We tried to leave, but they won't let us, Linda said. Jerry came later. He brought me the documents. Sign it and you'll be free, he said. The document stated that I was agreeing to retraining and transfer to another location. I didn't sign it. They started hitting me. Until I lost consciousness. When I woke up, they took me to another store. Not to ours, but to the neighboring city. The same people worked there. The same documents. The same lists. I realized that this is not just a store. It's a network. And each of us is a part of the system. Those who know too much are transported to another place. Those who resist disappear. I can't leave. Every time I try, they find me. Sometimes it's just a letter. Sometimes it's a man in a crowd who stares at me for too long. Sometimes I think it would be better if they just killed me. But they don't kill. They make us work. They make you forget. They force you to be a part of it all. Every day in the new store was a copy of the previous one. The same shelves, the same smells of chlorine and heated coffee, the same faces, as if I just walked into a mirror. I was put in a room behind a warehouse, where the walls were covered with cracks, like old scars. There was a carpet with stains on the floor, which I preferred not to look at. The job was simple: lay out the goods, clean up the trash, smile at the customers. But my every move was being watched. One of my new colleagues, Tom, noticed me looking around nervously as we carried the boxes outside. "Don't worry," he said, pushing the cart. "You just don't know the rules." I asked him what he meant. He hesitated, but then whispered, "Never say you remember the last store. And don't ask questions. Just do your job and they won't touch you." But I couldn't keep quiet. At night, when everyone was leaving, I started searching the back room. I found a folder with documents in one of the cupboards. Lists of names. Many of the familiar surnames are people I knew from the previous store. There were dates and notes next to it: transferred, dismissed, deregistered. Under my name, it's in progress. I found one more thing: a store chain map. The red dots are the places where the employees were sent. One of them was blinking, as if someone was constantly moving it. I took a picture of the map on my phone, but the next day the screen went black. The device did not turn on anymore. One night Tom came up to me, holding a bag of sandwiches in his hands. "Eat," he said, handing me one. "You're too thin." I took a bite and felt dizzy. Everything went swimmingly. I woke up in the refrigerator compartment. The door was locked from the inside. Someone had drawn blood on the wall, he knows. When they found me, Tom was apologizing. I didn't mean to, he said, shaking. They forced me. Jerry came personally. You're not learning, he said, looking down at me. We gave you a chance to start over, but you keep getting in the wrong place. He handed me a new document. Sign it and you'll leave. You'll just walk away and forget everything. I didn't sign it. I was transferred to the night cleaning department. The work was hard, scrubbing floors, rinsing grease from equipment, cleaning toilets. But I started noticing oddities. Sometimes there was hair in the bucket for mopping floors. There are scraps of notes in the garbage bags. One of them said, they hide them in basements under refrigerators. I started looking for the entrance to the basement. At night, when the store was empty, I sneaked into the meat department. I found a trapdoor behind the shelves of frozen chicken legs. It was locked, but I tampered with the lock with a screwdriver. Stairs led down into the darkness. There was no light. I turned on my phone's flashlight. The basement was huge. Shelves with boxes covered with dust. One of them has an inscription, personal files of employees. I opened it. Inside there are folders with photos. The faces of people I knew. Some of them have disappeared. At the bottom of each folder are receipts for crematorium services. I heard footsteps upstairs. He quickly closed the hatch and returned to work. The next day, I was called to the office. Jerry was sitting at the table, next to a woman in a formal suit. This is Mrs. Gardner, Jerry introduced her. She'll help you adjust. Mrs. Gardner spoke softly, but her eyes were cold. You're tired, she said. You need to rest. We will pay for the treatment at the clinic. I refused. She smiled. It's not a suggestion. This is an order. I was picked up at night. In a black unmarked car. I was taken to a building that looked like an office. There were desks with computers, people in uniforms. They put me in front of the screen. There's a video on it. Jerry's face. Hello, he said. Do you still think you can leave? See what happens if you try. The video showed me how I go home, how I go into the basement, how I read the documents. They're always watching you, Jerry said. Then they gave me an injection. My head was spinning. I woke up in my room behind the warehouse. There are documents on the table. My contract. The signature is at the bottom. I didn't remember signing it. But I knew one thing, they wouldn't kill me. They want me to work every day. I felt like the system was consuming me. At first it was the little things. I forgot where I left my keys. I couldn't remember my mother's face. Then the nightmares started. I would wake up with the smell of meat and an oily taste in my mouth, as if I had eaten something rotten. One morning, I noticed that my hands were covered with small cuts. I didn't remember how they appeared. Mrs. Gardner came every week. She was sitting across from me in the office, asking the same questions. How do you feel? Do you trust us? Do you want to leave? I always answered no to the last question. She was smiling as if she knew I was lying. One night I heard a noise in the basement. Not the one I found under the meat department, but the other one behind the warehouse. I went there without turning on the light. The floor was cold under my bare feet. The door to the basement was ajar. Inside there is a smell of dampness and something burnt. I went downstairs. There were tables there. Lots of tables. Each one has documents, computers, and people on it. They worked in silence, just clicking the keys. No one paid any attention to me. I walked over to one of the tables. A man in a gray suit was typing on a keyboard. I looked at the screen. There was a list of names. My name was the first one. Next to it is a note, activated. I stepped back, but hit a chair. All heads turned in my direction. The eyes are empty, like those of mannequins. The man in gray said, "You shouldn't be here." I ran. I went upstairs and locked the door. But the next day I was called to the office. Jerry was sitting at the table, and Mrs. Gardner was next to him. "You broke the rules," he said. I was transferred to another point. Again. This time, to a store on the outskirts of the city. Other people worked there. They didn't talk much. They just nodded when I approached. One night, I noticed how one of them, a woman in her 40s, secretly put a note in her pocket. I approached her as she was leaving. "What are you hiding?" I asked. She looked at me in horror. "Don't ask," she whispered. "They're listening." Then she was gone. She just disappeared. No one asked where she was. I started looking for others. People who, like me, knew too much. I met a guy named Dan in one of the stores. He worked in the vegetable department. When I spoke to him, he immediately realized that I was not like the others. "Have you been to other locations too?" he asked. I nodded. He showed me his hand. There is a crescent-shaped scar on his wrist. They're marking it, he said, to know who has already completed the training. We started dating at night when the store was empty. We discussed how to escape, how to prove to the world that this system exists. But every time we were going to do something, we were found. We were threatened. They injected us with injections. One night, Dan didn't come. I was waiting for him, but his shift was replaced by a new person. I asked where Dan was. He's gone, the man replied simply. I never saw him again. I realized that I couldn't fight alone. I needed a plan. Something that will make them stop. I started collecting evidence. Photographed the documents. Recorded conversations. He hid information in various places, in empty cans, in the lining of clothes, in an old cassette player that he found in a warehouse. One day I found a note in a bag of rice. It said, "You're the last one." I didn't know what that meant, but I decided to act. I chose the night when it would be just me and the security guard in the store. When he fell asleep, I snuck into the office. I found the server. I connected the flash drive. Downloaded the data. Files with names, contracts, and point lists. Suddenly the light went out. I heard footsteps. I ran to the exit, but the door was locked. Jerry's voice came over the speaker, "You can't leave. You're already part of the system." I broke out the window and jumped out. I ran until I found myself in the city. I ran into the police station. He told me everything. About shops, about people, about murders. The officer looked at me like I was crazy. "If that's true," he said, "then why hasn't anyone disappeared? Why aren't there any bodies?" I didn't know what to say. Then I went to the newspaper. I told the journalist. She promised to look into it. But she was fired the next day. But the article never came out. Now I'm wandering. I'm writing this story in an old cafe where no one knows me. I can't stop. I can't leave. Every time I think I'm free, I get an email. Without a return address. Just one phrase, "You're the last one." Sometimes I see people who have worked with us. They look at me, but they don't speak. Sometimes I see Jerry. He's smiling that I woke up in my car. I didn't remember how I got there. It's dawn outside the window. The store across the street was closed. There is a notice on the door, "Renovation. Opening in a week." I looked at my hands. They were shaking. There was a flash drive in the glove compartment. I didn't remember putting it there. I decided it was time to leave. I started the engine, but I saw Jerry in the rearview mirror. He was standing at the entrance of the store, smiling. He raised his hand in greeting. I stepped on the gas. The car didn't budge. The engine stalled. I went out to check. Nothing under the hood. Only the wires are cut. I looked around the street. No one. Only the wind was blowing an empty soda bottle across the asphalt. I went to a car service station 2 blocks from the store. The door was open. It's empty inside. My car keys are on the table. There's a note next to it, "He knows where you sleep." I didn't go back to the car. I went on foot. Past other stores in the chain. There were people in work jackets in each of them, who looked at me as if they were waiting. I went into one to buy some water. The cashier did not take the money. "You're already in the system," he said. I asked him what he meant. He just smiled. I found a motel in the evening. I rented a room for the night. He locked the door and put a chair under the handle. I was awakened by a knock. There was a note on the floor under the door, "You're the last one." I ran out, leaving everything behind. I went to the bus station. I bought a ticket to the first city I saw. I was sitting by the window on the bus. I was looking at the road. But the further we drove, the more often the signs of the chain of stores flashed. They were everywhere. Every city, every street, they were chasing me. When the bus stopped, I got out. A man in a gray suit was waiting for me. He handed me an envelope. "From Jerry," he said. "There's a photo inside. It shows me sleeping in a motel. Signature, 'You are always with us.'" I went to the police. The officer, the same one who didn't believe me last time, looked at me with pity. "You look tired," he said. "Would you like to rest?" I said I needed help. He nodded and called a car. When they put me in the ambulance, I realized that this was not a hospital. The car went the other way. The windows were darkened. Inside there is a smell of medicines and something burnt. I tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. I was taken to a building that looked like an office. Jerry was there. He was waiting for me in a room with white walls. "You've been resisting for too long," he said. "But now you're ready." He handed me the document. "Sign it, and it's over." I didn't sign it. They started giving injections. Something heavy fell on my head. I was losing consciousness. I woke up in the store. Behind the counter. Tom was standing next to her. "Hello," he said. "You must be tired. Go get some rest." I went to the back room. There's a list of names on the wall. My name was the last one. Below it is the inscription, "Activated." I work here now. I smile at my clients. I'm cleaning up the trash. Sometimes, at night, I see new employees looking at me suspiciously. They think they know too much. But I don't tell them anything. Because I know that they will also become part of the system. Just like me. Just like everyone else. And when one of them starts asking questions, I just hand him the document. And I say sign it. And it will all be over.